Yes. Good evening, everyone. Um, Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know whom I'm talking to, but yes, wherever you are, you're welcome to this somehow in my heart. If I look at my heart, it says a wonderful session with two of um my lovely teachers on the path, Omid Safi and Sharon Salzberg, on this. Path of consciousness, awareness, loving kindness, compassion that we have been speaking about in a series that started in 2018 with John Kabat-Zinn. Um, Tonight, rightly so, we will, Brother Omid and dear Sharon will be speaking about love and kindness uh, through the eyes of Rumi and how we can embody it, how we can use it in the times of difficulty and that we are right now, pandemic. Just briefly, Professor Umid Safi is professor of Asian and Islamic Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University, United States, and director of illuminated course programs, author of many books, and teacher. And Sharon is a pioneer teacher, meditation teacher, loving kindness teacher, over 45 years of teaching, author of more than 10 books on the subject, and a co-founder of the famous Insight Meditation Society of United States in Massachusetts. So I'll keep it short. I'd like to bow deeply to you both, Sharon and Omid, for accepting to be here with us, for the community, and thank you to give us time. I think. Would you like to go on, Omid? You start the session, and then we move on to Sharon and. Oh, one technical thing. Sorry, I forgot my mistake. For those of you who are tuning in on your screen, there is an option for language. You need to put that on FR, Farsi. It stands for Farsi. To hear the Farsi version only, and you need to mute the original dialogue. So that way you only hear the Farsi translation of the session. Thank you, everyone. Please go ahead, please, Omid. Thank you.
Okay, Benam Khuda, and thank you so much, friends, for this opportunity to share these teachings in such a difficult time. And a lot of my own life has been spent following the Sufi path and Tariqe Irfaniye, and asking those questions about how are these relevant to our own life and context today. When you read some of the old mystical texts, one of the first ones written in Farsi was a text called Kashful Mahjub. Kashful Mahjub, the unveiling of the veil beloved. And the question that its author, Hojviri, asks us is simply to begin the path by having your heart be where your feet are. Have your heart be where your feet are. And that seems like such an obvious statement. Of course, I am right here and my feet are right here. من خودم اینجام و دلم هم اینجاست، قلبم هم اینجاست. So what is he really saying here? He's saying that so much of the time we live in a state of being scattered, that bodily we're in one place, but our mind, our thoughts, our attention are scattered all over the place. And at times we find that we are everywhere except for right here where our feet are. So one of the tasks of the path is to unify ourselves, to be present bodily, mind, emotion, and spirit in one place. In other words, there is a process of Tawheed, unification, which is not about making God one. God is already one. خدا یکی هست. We are the ones who have to become one. ماییم که باید یکی بشیم. And the method of doing so is through attention to the breath, through attention to our breath. When we pay attention to where our feet are, and in particular for so many of our Iranian friends, it is in a place that right now is mired in an immense amount of suffering. And I include myself in that. I have family members in Iran, many of whom have tested positive for COVID, some of whom we have had to bury, having given their life. The Sufi tradition tends to talk a lot about heart, dil ya qalb. But this heart is something quite different than the mere sentimentality, احساسی بودن, احساسات و اینا. It is the very throne of the spirit. It is the seat of the core of your being. And in the Sufi tradition, we are told that the heart is always in a state of change and transformation. In fact, the very word qalb, which we translate as heart, originally comes from the root of change. The heart is dynamic. The heart is perpetually being transformed. And we need to remain receptive to the changes of the heart. We need to learn to monitor the heart to see how the heart is doing in every state. We see the changes in our body. Right? I was just thirsty before we joined our conversation, so I took a drink of water. Well, yesterday, this water was flowing in some pipe. Perhaps a week ago, it was coming down from the heavens in form of a rain. It will go through my body, and in another day or so, it will be back in the pipes, and in another week, it will be back in the ocean. So everything that makes me who I am has been moving through the world of nature. And we can see this in form of our body, and our heart is likewise the same. We have traces of this teaching, of this dynamic nature of the heart, in the old classical usage of the Persian language. Sometimes we've lost this sense in the modern times. For example, وقتی میخوایم احوال پرسی بکنیم, when we want to ask somebody how they're doing, we just might say حالت چطوره, and we might not think very much of that. Whether the conversation was being had in Arabic, in Persian, in Urdu, in any of the classical Islamic language, when we wanted to see how somebody was doing, the question that we asked them was not to ask them, what are you doing? چیکار میکنی? We would ask them, how is the changing state of your heart? When we would say, حال شما چطوره? That word حال reflected the dynamic and evolving and growing and changing state of the heart. Hal was always differentiated from something that they called maqam, station, which was much more stable. If you want to think of an analogy, the hal of your heart would be like the weather. که هوای امروز چطوره? Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? Is it rainy? And it might be sunny now, but cloudy in the afternoon. Whereas the maqam reflects something like the climate. It's the summer season, it's the spring season, the winter season. So to learn to observe your own heart, to learn to observe these changing states of the heart. Maulana Rumi offers us, whom in Iran, of course, we call Maulavi, he offers us a beautiful analogy of looking at your heart as a receptacle, and he offers a beautiful teaching of recognizing your heart as what he calls a mehman khane, a guest house, a guest house. So think about this. Let's say we even ask one another, how are you doing? Well, somebody might say, "Man khubam, I'm good." Somebody else might say, "Man marizam, I'm ill. Man asabaniyam, I'm angry." In all those cases, we're making an equation between the I-ness, the me-ness, who I am, and the particular emotion that we're experiencing. Khubi, badi, asabani, good, bad, angry, sick. Maulana instead tells us to reframe the conversation as you yourself, the totality of your heart, is the mehman khane. You are the guest house. و بعضی از این احساساتی که طرف شما میان اینا مهمون شما هستن. The emotions that you're experiencing, these are your guests. بعضی از این مهمونا ممکنه که بیان و یکی دو سه روز بمونن و بعد برمیگردن. They might come and they might stay with you for 2 or 3 days and then they might leave. پس وقتی که یکی از این احساسات اومد بهشون بگین بفرمایید. شما میدونین که کدوم گوشه دلم میخواین بشینین. So you say to them, how wonderful. Here's that emotion called joy, which I love to see in my heart. Come on, enjoy. بفرمایید. You know where you like to sit. Go and make yourself at home. اما یه دفعه دیدین که آره غم اومده. You might see all of a sudden, here comes sorrow. بفرمایین غم. شما یکی از باوفاترین مهمونای من هستین. بعضی از عمر زندگی من بوده که هیچ کس دیگه نیامده منو ببینه اما شما همیشه میایین. Look, sorrow, you are one of my most faithful friends. There have been parts of my life that nobody else comes to visit me, but you keep on coming. So come on in. You know where you like to be. Go and make yourself at home. I am not you, but I'm your host. یه چند روز اینجا بمونین، بعدش هم برمیگردین. Stay for a few days, and then I know you will leave. What if we were to change our relationships with our emotions, with our thoughts, so that we observe them, we welcome them, we're gracious to them, مهمون نوازی نشون میدیم به فکر خودمون، به احساسات خودمون, but we don't make the mistake of identifying the wholeness of who we are with any one particular thought or any one particular emotion. So how can we practice some of these? Maulana gives us some teachings, and some of the other Sufis give us some teachings. بعضی از این عرفا و صوفیان قدیم درس‌های خیلی جالبی راجع به این مسئله دارن. One of these Sufi traditions comes to us from a Central Asian context, that place where Islam and Buddhism met. Just as here on this particular gathering, we have the depth of the Islamic tradition and the depth of the Buddhist tradition coming together. We have met before. And we're going to meet again, inshallah. So in that Central Asian context, there were Persian-speaking Sufis from the Naqshbandi tradition. این صوفیای طریقه نقشبند بودن. And they had the following saying: هوش بر دم، نظر بر قدم، خلوت در انجمن. They identify the essence of what you might call mindfulness, or we might call a robust spiritual life, as to be mindful of the breath. The very first step on the spiritual path is to be able to return your attentiveness to your breath, the breath as it comes into the heart center and the breath as it goes back out. نفستون که وقتی وارد این سینه میشه و وقتی که برمیگرده. Learning to pay attention to the breath is the very first step on this particular path. To keep your glance fixed on the path. Nazar bar qadam. Right? Instead of just always kind of looking around and seeing what's going on, you maintain your glance on your feet, and to have faith, as Fariduddin Attar says in Mantiq al-Tayr, the path is empty. It will appear when you take the first step. And khalvat dar anjuman, to cherish your solitude while maintaining a sense of community. Khalvat چیزی نیست که شما باید در یه غار برین. You don't need to go to some cave somewhere to practice khalvat, a retreat. No, you learn by mastering the breath to be in the midst of community, in relationship with your friends and loved ones and neighbors and strangers, while practicing this notion of, as they say, being alone with the one. با اون خدا تنها بودن. The more of this that we do, the lovelier your being becomes. When you stop identifying fully with any one emotion, you almost become like, as some of the old paintings showed, you are riding the lion instead of the lion devouring you. Maulana has this line, در خشم مکن تو خویشتن را پنهان که آن حسن تو پنهان شدنی نیست. بیا. Don't hide your loveliness in anger. Your beauty, your loveliness can never be hidden. Come, come. So think about how often people get when they're given over to a state of anger. Their face turns red, they're raising their voice, they're no longer in command of the breath, they're no longer in control of their heart. Anger is riding them. They've become a slave to that anger. Don't hide your loveliness. I know that in the conversations that you've been having, that you've been using this language of rest, استراحت. And that word, un اصطلاح استراحت, the expression استراحت, comes from the root for ruh, your spirit. Rest is not just laying down on a couch. Rest is being mindful of the need that your heart has to rejuvenate. If you pay attention to trees, a fruit tree, a flower, they're not always in bloom. همیشه در شکوفه نیستن. همیشه میوه نمیدن. They're not always giving you an anar, a pomegranate. Sometimes they have fresh leaves. Sometimes they give you fruit. Sometimes the leaves may fall Look at how graciously the tree sheds its leaves. And then sometimes the life of the tree, اون جان درخت, returns to its roots. And the cycle is repeated. Leaves, fruit, letting go of the leaves, going back to the roots and starting over. We need to become like this. One of the great diseases that we have in the modern world is that we measure our worth based on how busy we are. ما فکر میکنیم که هرچی مشغولتر باشیم ارزشمون بالاتره. We ask people, how is your heart? چطوری؟ حالت چطوره؟ And the only response that we get is, oh, I'm busy. سرم خیلی شلوغه. I've got so much going on. Well, you didn't tell me anything. هیچی به من نگفتی. Tell me something about your heart. Tell me something about how you are in this very moment. And if you pay attention to the رقص درویشان, the whirling ceremony of the dervishes, همیشه یه پاشون ساکنه و یه پاشون داره میچرخه. Always one foot is grounded, stable, stationary, and one foot is turning around themselves. They have mastered this combination of activity and repose. فعالیت و استراحت. اگه ما یاد بگیریم این کارو بکنیم، ما میتونیم برقصیم. If we learn to do this, then we too can enter the dance of life. I think the last thing that I want to say, and then I want to turn it over to my dear friend Sharon, and looking forward to learning from her, is I know particularly for those of us who come from backgrounds like Iran, خیلی از ماهایی که از فرهنگ‌های اصیل قدیمی مثل ایران میایم, sometimes we might feel like we have to turn to something like yoga or transcendental meditation or some other practice in order to learn mindfulness. شاید فکر بکنیم که باید بریم به طرف TM یا طرف یوگا تا اینکه ما توجه بتونیم یاد بگیریم، mindfulness بتونیم یاد بگیریم. اما در حقیقت وقتی که به خود این گنج فرهنگ ما برمیگردیم, when you return to these treasures of our own tradition, what do you find? You find people like علاءالدوله سمنانی. سمنان, یه ساعت اونورتر تهران. The city of Semnan, just an hour from Tehran, who had the most beautiful system of chakras, which he called lata'if, the subtle centers. And in the movement from latifa qalibiyya, latifa nafsiyya, latifa qalbiyya, latifa ruhiyya, latifa sirriyya, latifa khafiyya, latifa akhfa. This was a complete system of light centers, subtle centers that would be connected to the breath. همین سیستم لطائف همیشه متوسل بود به این سیستم دم یا نفس. And I hope that those of us who come from Iranian backgrounds can rediscover these treasures and to put them in practice. Thank you for the gift of your time, and may something of this be of aid in rejuvenating you.
Thank you, Brother Omid. So wonderfully, you have brought it home and illuminating. Thank you. Sharon, would you like to take on, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And first I want to say, Omid, how wonderful it is to see you again. We were together in California. It must have been last January. So it was one of the last trips I took, or it was last times I was ever with somebody physically teaching. And so how wonderful, just to reunite. And I want to thank you all for the invitation to be able to speak, and also apologize for my inability to speak anything other than English. Even at the beginning of the pandemic, when I began to isolate, I thought, I'm going to learn another language, which didn't happen. So my whole life, it's not been working somehow. Uh, I should consult a neuroscientist actually to see what part of my brain doesn't seem to do that. But the consequence of that, of course, is that I've also only read poets like Rumi in English, and so uh, even so, it has been very impactful and very important. Um, I was thinking, listening to Omid, first of all, if we no longer ask people, one another, how is your heart, which I think is the condition all over the world, we say more like, what do you do? Like what's your occupation? If we no longer ask after one another's hearts, then we're kind of lonely, aren't we? And cut off from one another. Whereas actually, the truth of our lives is that we are so deeply connected, and yet we're not accessing that understanding. So when I think of love as a quality, I like to think of it not so much as a feeling or an emotion, but as I've heard quoted, as an ability, as a capacity that we all have. And certainly it is a feeling that we yearn for and we strive for. But what about love as an ability, as a capacity within ourselves? And for me, that reflection turned a lot of things around. I would realize that I would often have an image, say, of a delivery person standing at my doorstep holding a package of love and looking down at the address maybe and thinking, nah, I'm going somewhere else. And I would be, wait a minute, then I have nothing. Because if that sense of love is only in the hands of another to give us or perhaps take away, then we're lost in the fragility and the changing nature of the world, of circumstance. But if it's an ability, if it's a capacity within me, then it's mine to tend to nurture, to grow. And others certainly may inspire it or ignite it or threaten it, but ultimately it is mine. And not only then is it a capacity or an ability, it's a responsibility. I realized that if I wanted love in a conversation, maybe I had to be the one to bring it forth. If I wanted love in an encounter, in some, work, some negotiation, whatever, maybe I had to be the one to bring it forth. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that because it might seem devastating or frightening in some way, but actually it's tremendously empowering. And one of the quandaries, one of the questions that comes up all the time is a sense of imbalance. Perhaps we are kind of caring people, giving people, and we focus on others, and then we get exhausted. It's so interesting hearing the word rest used so often because it is probably my favorite word now. And I remember I wrote a book many years ago, uh, which had a lot of meditation instruction in it, and I kept talking about rest. Maybe we rest our attention on the feeling of the breath, and we're going to get to do some practice together. Or we rest our attention on phrases, on prayers, on images, whatever it might be. But the word is rest. It's like for once in our lives, we don't have to manipulate or improve or elaborate or reject what we're looking at. We're just resting. So when I turned in that manuscript to the editor, when she sent it back for the first time, she said to me, "You're using the word rest a lot. Are you very tired?" And I say, well, probably, but that's also the word. And that in itself is different. There's also implicit in that kind of practice something Amit actually referred to, which is the ability to begin again. So many times people say to me, how can I maintain mindfulness all day long? Or how can I stop from ever losing my temper at my children? How can I keep calm no matter what is going on? And I always say, that's not going to happen, because the process of growth and progress and change is usually one of falling down and then starting over. We lose it, we get overcome, we get confused, we get overwhelmed, and then we realize it and we can come back. We can start over, we can return. We say the healing is in the return, not in never having wandered to begin with. And I've seen that in my meditation practice as I was taught. And it's probably the first thing I ever learned, and probably the most important thing I ever learned, because every single day in life, as it is, we are continually beginning again. We fall down and we have to pick ourselves up or let others help us up, and we go on. Or we make a mistake, or we have a beautiful, bright aspiration and we forget it and we have to start over. Or we're set on a certain pattern, a certain way of being, and we have to correct it. We have to alter it because it's just not working. And so rather than feeling that that's failure or having done something wrong, that's like life itself is change, and being able to renew, to start over, to begin again seems tremendously important. So I actually had a book come out in September. It was supposed to come out in June, but then because of the pandemic, it got delayed a few months. And I had a friend, every word of the book was written before the pandemic. So I turned it in before January, before I was with Amit in California. And I had a friend reading it post-pandemic, and he was having a very difficult time in many ways. And he was reading it in order to excerpt it somewhere, and he said to me, I like the book, but I keep reading your examples and thinking, that's what made you anxious? Wait till you see what's coming. So I thought, oh, great, I wrote a totally irrelevant book. And then because of that delay in publication, I went to the publisher and I said, would it be okay if I wrote a new preface to try to create a context for what people are going through now? So they said, okay. And then I had a few months where I pondered constantly, what's still true? Like, what's still true for me in the midst of anxiety and grief and anger and exhaustion? What's still true? Another way of saying that is, what can I count on? What can I rely on? Where can I rest in the larger sense of what's guiding my life? What's more important to me than anything? And I realized how much of what I was counting on, what was still true for me, even as everything else shattered or broke or changed, was a lot about the power of love, which I really believe in, and that needed to include myself. It needs to include ourselves. That there's some barrier when we can only give or only receive that can actually dissolve. So then there's just this free flow. And so that's really basically what I wrote in the preface, that qualities that we can count on are things like love and the capacity we have to grow and to change and to learn where those barriers are and to include ourselves. If that's been who's been left out, and so on. So, what I'd like to do is spend a little time with you just doing some meditation practice together. I'd say that in all my years of teaching meditation, which has been a long time, since 1974. And I'd say there are probably two main controversies I've encountered, a few more minor ones, but one is talking about things like the power of love. So many people have the kind of conditioning where that's too sentimental. It's like overly sweet. It means you'll deny pain, you'll deny conflict, you'll pretend. It's kind of a hypocritical state. And of course, I don't believe that at all, nor have I experienced that. I have really experienced, as we do when we pay attention, that the force of love is really a force, and it can cut through many obstacles, because it doesn't mean liking somebody or approving of them. It means the really bone deep appreciation that our lives are intertwined, that we are actually connected, that's the truth of things. And for years, I've been somebody just sent me a quotation of me from like 10 years ago, which is always an interesting experience. And what I've been saying for years is that so many things show us this, that our lives are connected. Economics shows us this, environmental consciousness shows us this, even epidemiology shows us this. And I've used the example for years of epidemiology because I have friends who are very involved in the smallpox campaign in India. And so I've just been interested in epidemiology. And so for years, people have said to me, what does that mean? Or why are you using that word? Or, what's that about? And here we are, right? So we can see that our lives are connected, and the beautiful face of that is compassion. It's mutuality, respect, regard for how interdependent we are, even if we never meet. And so because of that truth, that's why I call love a force. And the other controversy is the idea that it can be strengthened, it can be cultivated. Many times we think of love as a gift, and it can be, of course, a gift, but exclusively as a gift, we either have it or we don't. And what about that capacity part where we can grow it, we can strengthen it, we can change it? So that's what the practice is really about. So we're going to spend just a few minutes practicing together. If you like, you can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. Just let your energy settle. If you can find the breath either where it is strongest for you or clearest for you, or perhaps, as Amit said, moving in and out of the heart center, the center of your chest. You can find that place and rest. See if you can feel one breath without regard to what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath. Just this one. And if you find yourself caught up and lost in thought, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. We say the more important moment is the next moment after you've been gone, because that's the moment we have the chance to be really different. So instead of blaming yourself or considering yourself a failure, that's the moment of resilience where we can let go gently and then just begin again. Bring your attention back to the feeling of the breath. And then we can move our attention from resting in the breath to resting in the silent repetition of certain phrases. The phrases are the gift of the heart to ourselves and to others. It's a way of paying attention differently. With ourselves, for example, instead of going through the list of our flaws again, we wish ourselves well. May I be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease, which means ease of heart. May I be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease. It's gift giving, it's offering. And think of somebody you feel grateful for, somebody who brings some light, some brightness into your life, even if you've never met them. Maybe they've inspired you from afar. Could be an adult, could be a child. If someone comes to mind, you can bring them here. Get an image of them. Say their name to yourself. Get a feeling for their presence. And offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. Even if the words don't seem perfect, they're carrying the heart's energy. May you be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease. And then we'll just have a gathering, whoever comes to mind, friends, colleagues, family, and offer loving kindness to the collective, to the group. May you be safe. Be happy. be healthy, live with ease, or whatever your words may be. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Personally, I felt we could sit much longer, but I guess a few minutes a day, I hear neuroscience is telling us a few minutes a day can help. And my take from both of you, Amit and Sharon, is it's here. You're saying it's here. It's really you don't have to go anywhere. It's inside of us. And Sharon is saying it's a capacity that we can cultivate it. And it's all it takes is just an intention to remembering it, remembering the heart, and practicing it. Thank you so much. This is wonderful news in these times. Would you have time to take some questions, both of you, Sharon, Amit? Can you spend some time to take some questions?
Of course.
I have one question before I look at the chat box. This one came through the Instagram. And I think, Amit, you can take this. Malihe, she's asking, how do I differentiate between heart and mind? Sometimes I have difficulty to know what is heart, what is mind.
No, what a great question. Great question. One of the challenges that we have is that these terms are used in multiple contexts and to mean very different things. And particularly when we're trying to connect them to teachings and practices that have been a part of our tradition for centuries, there's a challenge about that. Do we mean by mind something like aql, or do we mean something like the post-Enlightenment Western European notion of a somewhat flat, rational mind? Right? Those are very different things. To begin with, exactly as Sharon was saying, just as with heart and with love, we want to be thinking of it not only as a gift, but also as an ability, as a capacity, as a what we used to call a quvat, that can be stronger, that can be strengthened. It's helpful to remember that in our tradition, that the aql was not in your head, that what we think of as the intellect was not something in your head, it was actually centered in the heart. که مرکز عقل تو کلتون نبود، تخت عقلتون در سینه بود، در دل بود، در قلب بود. So I think to begin with, to think of the intellectual approach to thing as something that is heart-centered already, right? That we're not bound to this kind of a conflict between the heart and the mind. Maulana sometimes uses this analogy, this is in the Masnavi, of you are like a bird that has two wings. And these two wings have to learn to soar together. So you want to practice that harmony. You want to practice that balance. And he says at one point that the aql can elevate you all the way to the threshold of the divine. به بالاترین مقام بهشت عقل میتونه شما رو برسونه. But if what you desire is to enter into the divine presence, only love can do that. Since God's being is ishq, is love, only love can enter into love. So I think that's a kind of helpful thing. In very practical sense, in terms of what Malihe had asked about, if what you find is that your thoughts are tending towards a preoccupation with a bounded, limited, isolated notion of yourself, cut off from other people, cut off from nature, cut off from the divine, that is your mind, what I sometimes call the monkey mind, playing tricks on you. But the heart is always reaching out for connection. If it's making you aware of your connection to a friend, to a teacher, to a teaching, to a practice, to trees, to a river, to a cat, to a prophet or a saintly being, or to God. So I think the heart is always making you aware of how you are an interconnected being. But the monkey mind sometimes wants you to see the whole of the cosmos as being limited inside of you. That's perhaps a start.
Thank you, Omid. Yes. And Sharon, Maida is asking, you talked about resting. She's asking, what is the meaning of real resting?
Well, I guess I would say a few things. One is, of course, there's a lot of science now about sleep and things like that, but I think of resting as a momentary thing often, even just to be able to step away from the pressure, the momentum, or the chaos around us, and just to settle what, perhaps we've been very scattered and all over the place, and we just come back. We just return. And when we return, there is this quality of rest because we're not dissatisfied with what we're resting on. So, for example, the first meditation instruction I ever received was sit and feel your breath. Just feel the normal flow of the natural breath. And I realized that was difficult for me for many reasons, including almost as soon as this breath was happening, I was leaning forward mentally to get ready for the next 50. And I was a very frightened person. A lot had already happened to me in my life. I didn't know what might happen next. I felt like I had to be ready for it. And so for me, in the interests of balance, I used to say to myself, settle back. Let the breath come to you. I also used to say, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. Because I had so much performance anxiety. It's like I'd never done it before. So settle back. Let the breath come to you. That feeling in that moment is rest. And it may only last a moment, but it is essential for us to then have the energy to meet a challenge or adversity. And so just a moment will count.
I think that's the secret. Just the moment counts. So you're breaking down. Thank you. There's another question. I think this is very relevant. I leave it to you both. Which one of you want to answer? Nasreen is asking, in a lockdown situation, how can I meditate when there's always noise? I think she's referring to the fact that we are at home and there's noise and there's life. How can I meditate when in such a situation?
Amit, do you want to go for it?
Oh, you go first in this one.
Okay. I would say my first instinct is to say we have to incorporate or include the sound, and instead of, first of all, everything will depend on paying attention. So the first thing is, how am I relating to the sound? Sometimes we try to resist it and the rest of our body tightens up and we get very tense. And so if that's what you find, just relax and actually use the sound in the beginning of a session as an object of awareness. Of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others, but we don't have to chase after them, to hold on or push away. It's like a weather storm passing through. You just see if you can let the sound come and go, and then have it recede a little bit into the background. It's actually a good lesson because even in the best of circumstances where we can control a lot, we cannot control everything. And ultimately, our ability to be mindful will have to include some very disagreeable experiences. We try to make it quiet, but you can't then insist. I think I won't have any difficult memories come up, or this particular emotion is not, I'm done with that. Right. And so even the sound is good preparation for being able to deal with difficulty.
So somehow wherever you go, there you are. So what are you going to do about this now?
Yeah.
So you're saying you allow the sound even to enter.
Yeah.
You're resting. Yeah. Wonderful. And one last one. Mina is asking, is there a difference between compassion and loving kindness? I think this is a technical one.
From yes, I mean there are obviously similarities and also distinctions. Only in subtle ways, perhaps, and so I wouldn't make like a sharp division, but certainly in the Buddhist tradition there are subtle distinctions in terms of where they're born most easily and the particular challenges to each. So they say loving kindness, that sense of connection, can most easily arise from recognizing that everybody wants to be happy. And not in a superficial sense, but everyone wants a feeling of belonging, of having a home somewhere in this body, in this mind, with one another on this planet. Everybody wants to be happy. And it's because of the force of ignorance, and we get misled, we get confused, and so we create suffering. But everybody wants to be happy, and that brings forth loving kindness. Compassion has a little bit of a different flavor because it's born from recognizing suffering. And if not actual acute suffering, then vulnerability. Because we don't all suffer in the same amount, clearly, but we're all so vulnerable. Life is so changeable, so fragile. And when we mostly reflect on that, that's when this other related feeling that we call compassion comes up. It's got a little poignancy in it, some other flavor. And in terms of challenges, it said that loving kindness, if it's not accompanied by wisdom, um, will become this kind of attachment. Like if we think of it as generosity, it stops being a freely given gift, like more like may you be happy by Tuesday. I think I can give you a few days, and then hurry up. It's like our own agenda. Whereas compassion, when it kind of falls, becomes what we would call burnout. We care, we recognize suffering, we want to do something about it, but it's too much. We're overwhelmed. So things like that are the way the distinction is made.
Umid, would you be willing to take a question?
Sure, of course.
The question for you says, how do you find balance between knowing your heart as being as a guest house, with avoiding the difficulties of life? I think if I can translate it right. There's life and difficulty, pandemic, and this your heart being the resting place. How do you find?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm actually not so persuaded that avoiding the difficulties of life is a sustainable project. Certainly if you love someone and if you have compassion for them, the desire to spare them suffering is very understandable, right? But I think the truest spiritual teachings that I know begin with an affirmation that everybody hurts, everybody's suffering, everybody's vulnerable, we ourselves hurt, we ourselves are vulnerable. And then they move on to assure you that you're not alone, that you're not hopeless, that you've not been abandoned in the midst of this ocean, that in the midst of the ocean of sorrows, love is your companion. Daryای غم, عشق is going to be with you. I think the teachings that I gravitate towards are the ones that remind you that, and they use a divine language, that the God of the mountaintop is the God of the valley bottom, that the God of the darkness of the night is the God of the daytime. And at the end of the day, the one that is sending the challenges and the hardships is the one that also is providing the ease and the comfort. I think to do without that, we end up with a view of God as a kind of Santa Claus or Haji Firuz or whoever it is that brings presents to children, just handing out goodies. And then when the hardships come, well, who is responsible for that? Is it the devil? Is it yourself? Is it something? And I think particularly for those of us who are caregivers, to be able to see the cyclical nature of life. We welcome lives into this world and we bury others. And at some point, somebody's going to bury us. And to receive the child that comes with love and with affection, as one of the old Sufis said, when you're born, you're the one that's crying and everybody else is laughing. And you want to live your life so that when the time comes to bury you, you want to be laughing and everybody else around you is crying. And they're crying not because you're dead, they're crying because they miss that heart connection with you. So I think, on one hand, enabling yourself to swim in the ocean of life rather than sinking. To cultivate, sometimes use a boat analogy, that yes, you yourself have to know how to swim, but on this boat of life, you're not alone. There's other people on your boat. And it's very helpful to ask yourself that question, who's in my boat? Who is it that when I really hit rock bottom, I can just reach out my hand and I know that they're going to be there to grab it. And likewise, in whose boat am I? Who are the people in my life that when I see them struggling, I don't even wait for them to muster the courage to ask me. I will reach out to them, and if they need it, they will grab it. Again, this is that Molana story of the person who's drowning in the river, and everyone goes up to that person and they're like, give us your hand, give us your hand. And the man is just drowning. And then the Sufi teacher comes and he says, take my hand, take my hand. And the guy grabs it and he's able to rescue him. And everyone is puzzled, and they're like, why did he listen to you while he was not listening to us? And the Sufi teacher says, well, it's because he was drowning, and at the moment of his drowning, you wanted him to give you something. But in his moment of drowning, I offered him something. So I think in as much as that desire to be spared pain and disease and suffering is very understandable, I think to learn to receive them with some measure of graciousness, and to know that we're not doomed to be overwhelmed by them, that we have teachings and practices and stories and beings to help us navigate them.
Thank you. Reminds me of what Baba Ramdas, I think, once said. One of the most difficult things for him after the stroke was for him to accept, receiving.
That's correct.
If
Yeah.
I'm right, if I'm right about this.
Yes, yes. He said that.
Sharon, one more question. Would you have time, a minute for a question?
I have 3 minutes, so we can do it.
Yeah, there you go. Yasaman asks, how can we cope with the fear of self-compassion and letting the love come in to our heart again? That's it. It's 3 minutes question.
Well, that's perfect segue after Ramdas. It's true. He said that. Well, sometimes the fear comes because of certain misunderstandings, like whenever I teach about self-compassion, somebody protests and says, well, that's just being lazy. That means I have no standards of behavior or excellence or something like that. But to understand that self-compassion, studies are showing, is the most effective way to learn something new, to change a habit, to make progress, because the amount of time we spend in blaming ourselves and chastising ourselves is, first of all, exhausting, and it's demoralizing. If we look at what resilience is really made of, it doesn't happen with all of that blame. It happens when we can begin again. So really understanding the nature of self-compassion is important. And then attention or mindfulness is, I think, one of the most valuable things we have, because it is, first of all, how we make things real. We're inspired by a beautiful passage and genuinely, truly inspired, but how are we speaking to our neighbor? Or how do we speak to ourselves when we've made a mistake? And it's only when we can pay attention that we see, before the eruption, oh, I'm feeling agitated, I'm feeling whatever. And it's only when we can pay attention to what it feels like when we're generous, when we can accept ourselves, then we understand the power of it. So I find attention is the key to really everything. And Ramdas did say that. It was very profound. He had been in a wheelchair, living in a wheelchair for maybe 17 years at that point, and his speech was full of big silences as he tried to think of the word, and very different from how it was before. And he said the most difficult thing about his stroke, more than physical pain, more than being in the wheelchair, more than the changes in his speech, was having to accept help. And he said it was the most difficult and the most liberating. And I would say, for those, I've known him since 1971. He was at my first meditation retreat. Those last years of his life, because there was no barrier, he was giving and receiving. It was like he was made of light. It was really an extraordinary transformation for him. And so it was really inspiring.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Omid. We are already over time. And thank you so much for making the time. It was delightful and illuminating hour with you both. And thanks for everyone listening.
Thank you so much for making it happen.
Yes.
آرزوی محبت و عشق و سلامتی و تندرستی و خوبی و شادی و خوشی برای تمام دوستان.
مرسی امید جان و همچنین برای شما. And same for you, Sharon. May you be well, happy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Live long.
Sharon, I was just translating your blessing more or less into Persian for them.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I like seeing your cat too, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
We had a visitor for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.